So yeah, I mean, I can literally just start by asking you, can food be addictive?
Absolutely, because it's a behavioral addiction.
Okay. So you don't mind people naming food in the context of addiction. I will say one thing that pisses me off, and this comes from a person who was morbidly obese. I hate when people say that food can be as addictive as cocaine, because a lot of times those people never tried cocaine. But if we disregard that, you do believe that there's nothing wrong with
I
that
think it's the same
connotation.
kind of behavioral addiction. So sugar in isolation is not addictive. We all know that, right? But behavioral addictions, say look at porn, right? That's
Mhm.
a behavioral addiction. Well, food can become a behavioral addiction too, especially with hyperpalatable foods. My views on addiction are different. I feel that you can reframe your relationship with substances where you can use them recreationally and you don't excessively use them. Of course, you should probably take some time for abstinence, but you can rework your relationship with all substances, all food, all behaviors to a more healthy relationship.
I'm not here just to talk about myself, but like being a person, like I never deemed myself as a food addict, but in retrospect, now after like 15 years of investing into myself, into education related to coaching to nutrition, right? I definitely can see that connection because I essentially substituted every single emotional reaction and emotional cope with food, right?
Yep.
That's essentially, you know, addiction in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, food, substances, everything. We use it to escape a negative emotion because we've been sold by the media
Mm-hmm.
that if you feel angry or happy or anything, you use these substances or food to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't actually do anything. They don't go into the mind and change your thoughts ever. They
Yeah.
just amplify what you're already thinking.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about enhancing certain emotions, I think also we cannot neglect the fact that food is so ingrained into our culture, into family rituals, even on a national level, right? Like you guys have Thanksgiving, which for us Europeans, we always connect Thanksgiving with these huge, massive, glamorous meals. So what we have is Christmas meals, Eastern meals, right? And it's everything like, tied to elevating certain emotions. But so there is this fine line between, there is nothing wrong with doing that when it's a part of a healthy ritual. But then again, we can become addicted or dependable on food as a coping mechanism. And that's
Yeah,
kind
and
of
I
what happened
think
with
the
me.
fundamental reframe too is that it's not actually going in and making you happier. It's the social experience in those situations that are giving you the excitement and all the feel good feelings. It's not the drug or the food or the behavior that is going in and making these things special. It's just an
Hmm.
enhancer. Like, I'm sad, so I need a pint of ice cream, or I'm sad,
Yeah.
so I need to go drink, or whatever the substance or behavior
Hmm.
is. Like, you stop looking at it as a crutch. And
Yeah.
that's important to healing your relationship or whatever. I don't like healing your relationship. I like learning and growing, but you
Hmm.
get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think the biggest issue when we talk about food addiction in any context, even if you perceive food addiction with quotation marks, the food is always there. Even
Yep.
with alcohol addiction, you can abstain from it and not be exposed to it. I mean,
Yeah.
you do have to change your lifestyle drastically, especially if you live in an area or in a location where, alcohol is pretty much a big, like
I don't
locally.
think that's helpful to do that, by the way.
Okay. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So when you frame everything as a trigger, right? Going into a bar or whatever as triggers, that's an external locus of control. Nothing
Mm.
has the power. If you don't want to do something, you're not going to go into a bar and drink. If I see heroin, I am not going to do it because I have literally no interest in doing it. It doesn't
Mm.
have like this psychological pull on me. It's not going to trigger me to do it, even though I've had surgeries. So I've had morphine before. right? Does that make sense? The
No, that
differentiation.
makes perfect sense because like when I said it, initially it kind of made sense to me because you have this analogy that when you want to detach yourself from something in life, if you're exposed to it still, it's kind of like being an alcoholic
Trigger.
working at a bar, right? It's kind of like that trigger. But at the same time, like I'm not practicing that even with my clients because like when we talk about like food addiction and it just being dependable on food and then using food as a coping mechanism and even especially like trying to escape hunger, like I always teach my clients to try to educate my clients and try to motivate them not to do that, right? So you have this thing in fitness industry but that's very prominent, which is if my client constantly thinks about hunger and has this like food noise, the best thing to do is just to kind of give them a lot of volume of low calorie meals that are filled with protein or maybe fiber just to make them feel full. But essentially what we're doing there, yeah, we are putting them into caloric deficit, hopefully, but we're not essentially treating the core issue, which is the necessity or at least the belief of necessity of making yourself feel stuffed to
Yes.
subdue the hunger.
So makes people weaker when they avoid triggers like that too,
Yeah, yeah.
because then when they're exposed to it, they don't know how to respond and they think that the triggers control them. And then they do the thing and they're like, well, I was exposed to the trigger. And so I rip the Band-Aid off immediately. And I'm just like, you go about your normal life, even if you're an alcoholic, go to that Christmas party. And then I work on their beliefs, obviously, around how it's serving them, because it's usually always tied to erroneous beliefs about how it's making them more social, which it cannot do. Like there's always beliefs around there that we change first, but I like to build their self-confidence up by not making them avoid these locations, people, places, or things, right?
Just talking with you, that there's a lot of like cognitive dissonance, like just
Oh, I
feeling
know.
that.
No,
Yeah.
like it's all over
Yeah.
media, it's all in our movies, everything, that you're a weak, helpless victim.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't necessarily think that everybody is in that like victim mentality state because I think that truly people who are constantly actively avoiding triggers, they think that that is the harder way of dealing with things rather than jumping into it and just saying no. You know what I mean? Because it's what you're saying essentially is that, being a victim of triggers is essentially detrimental, right? And that's kind of like trying to avoid them, like I mentioned earlier, like not going into a bar or just changing your surrounding, changing your environment, maybe moving to another fucking country or something like that. What you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's actually the easy way out. The hard way and the proper way of dealing with these things is just facing them at face value, throwing yourself in that situation and gaining empowerment from rejecting participating into those negative habits that you develop.
I think it leads to better long-term resilience if you do it, if you just have them do the thing now instead of avoiding all these landmines. Now, of course, it's going to be easier to avoid the activating places. I don't like the word trigger because then it makes people feel like helpless. It's easier to avoid those while you're changing your beliefs. You can do that within like 3 months if you're working with someone. You can work out all your erroneous beliefs about what these things have to offer you. Like there's usually some cognitive distortions in there, right? You work with people all the time. There's usually cognitive distortions about what these things are doing for them. And so I think avoiding those landmines for say 90 days, it's probably better for the person. But long term, I want them right back in there as soon as possible to have exposure and to prove to themselves they can do it.
Yeah, because that's the only way to actually notice those cognitive distortions, right? Because like if you're just avoiding it, you can't really know that that's what's happening.
Through it, and that's why there's so many relapses, like with weight and any kind of detrimental habit. There's relapses in behavior because they're never actually addressing the beliefs.
I mean, it's not the same thing as like proper addiction, but for a lot of my clients who are trying to lose weight, like permanently, right? Not just short-term goals. The biggest issue is hunger. The biggest issue is this, especially like since GLP-1s came out, you have this huge buzzword, food noise. Like we use food noise, occasionally sometimes. Now there's a lot of content created just around food noise. So for me, that fear of hunger is something that I try to motivate my clients to go into it from a perspective of not trying to run away from it,
Yep.
not necessarily try to fight it, just understand that dealing with it and facing it and accepting it, that it's a temporary thing, and learning how to notice it and kind of experience it from a different mentality rather than, holy shit, I'm hungry, I need to eat, otherwise I'm cranky, I'm hangry, right? All these beliefs that we have, which is
Yep.
there is nothing wrong with feeling hunger in between meals. There is nothing wrong with not eating for a couple of days. No, there's nothing bad is going to happen to most people if they fast for 48 hours. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not using that as a tactic, and I'm never prescribing something like that to my clients.
Yes. But
All I'm trying to say is there's nothing bad that's going to happen. You're not going to die. So as soon as you start accepting that, it loses power over you. And as
yeah,
soon
you
as it
take
loses power
come
over
to
you, like, yeah,
observer consciousness. That's what it sounds like
exactly.
to me.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that works with all habits, all lifestyle. Like, you are a better human if you're sitting in observer consciousness and
Uh-huh.
watching your thoughts
Yeah.
and knowing that your life is not going to fall apart if you do not act right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you've been in fitness industry, health industry for,
15,
many
20 years. Yeah.
years.
Long time.
Exactly. Kind of like myself, probably even longer. So like it's not a new thing for you to hear me talking about typical fitness industry prescription of avoiding hunger, essentially trying to escape hunger, fearing hunger. You have a lot of businesses that are made specifically on that fear mongering of hunger, through recipes and food volume and protein this, protein that. Like everything is fucking high protein right now, just to increase the satiety. And like
Yep.
if you want to permanently change and you have issues with food, doesn't it make fucking sense
To
to
get
do that anymore?
yeah,
Yeah,
being
it's that.
uncomfortable with that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that might sound corny, but it really is that. Like it absolutely is that. I spoke with Mike Howard, fantastic coach with like decades of experience, nutrition and training coach from Canada, and I think you know Mike Howard, right?
Yep, I do.
And he said pretty much the same thing. Embracing discomfort is huge, and not from a masochistic like standpoint. It's just trying to understand that this is actually not a big deal. And maybe it is a big deal. We're not trying to diminish anyone's struggles, right? But convincing yourself that feeling hungry is not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things just gives you empowerment over it.
Yes, understanding that it's just like temporary too. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah. So I'm interested, speaking of, hunger and food noise and whatnot, all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but in the last couple of years, pretty recently, GLP-1s came out, right?
Yep.
And you have this thing where you inject it into your body and then there's no hunger. So do you see GLP-1s potentially as something that might provoke addictions of sort?
No, I don't think that they will provoke an addiction. What they're doing physiologically is dampening the reward circuitry. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
opposite of that. I think you could have a psychological dependence on them, maybe. That would more accurately, and that might seem like pedantic or whatever, but it's not. It does, that
Yep.
differentiation matters. I don't think they can become addictive physiologically.
I appreciate your differentiation of those two, because for me and for a lot of people, addiction equals dependency on something, right? But like you said, it doesn't have to be. But I also have clients who are kind of like afraid going off Ozempic specifically because they're afraid that not necessarily they're going to regain everything, but they're afraid that that food noise, that hunger is going to come back. Like they're not really afraid of regaining weight. They're specifically afraid of that feeling of constant hunger.
That's because they've never dieted without one, or not successfully anyway, usually. So I've been all sorts of different weights. I've dieted and I've eaten huge surpluses, and your appetite does regulate down, and it will for them too. Like their stomach, they're eating smaller meals, right? And so their stomach volume can't take as much when they come off. The problem is long term is they don't learn these habits usually before they go on it. I think everyone should try to instill these habits before they go on it, and then they can go on it as a booster, right? I'm not anti GLP at all. I'm just all about the smart usage of these drugs, right? And so I think that going into it with these better food habits, first of all, can help them come off easily.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
don't think we've
Yeah.
looked at that. I think the studies that we have just look at it in people that were obese their entire life, right? They've struggled with their weight their entire life. And so they've never learned these habits. So of course they have to like remain on it.
Mm-hmm. But here's my take on that. I'm not anti GLP-1s at all. I'm a big supporter of it, actually. But the only thing that I'm anti against is this celebrity movement of promoting them as if they are, like a protein bar. It's like
Yeah.
that's kind of what I hate. I hate the entire hypocrisy about it. I hate the vast majority of fitness industry that's trying to fearmonger people and shame people who are using GLP-1s. And
Yep.
the biggest hypocrisy in that is that a lot of our associates from fitness industry, or the cesspool we call fitness industry, they are literally on shitload of anabolic steroids, shaming people who use GLP-1s because they're like morbidly obese their entire life, and they're finally have something to have as a tool to actually enjoy the pursuit of health. And this is where I absolutely cannot be anti GLP-1s ever, simply because if this drug was available for me back in like 2009, where I was at my heaviest, around like 400 pounds, I would jump on board with that like in a second, right? And from that perspective, I cannot allow myself to be a hypocrite. But even if I didn't have that experience, honestly, I would still just support it. From a coaching perspective, you have no idea how much I enjoy working with certain clients. Because not because they are more difficult or something like that, just because I care about people. I really give a shit about making people like healthier and happier, just because like that was my history. I want everyone on this side of the fence.
Yes.
But because it's so hard and difficult to watch somebody struggling so much, and it's not about me, but it's so much more enjoyable to see someone actually loving the process. And because they don't have this constant struggle with hunger, they get to a point of feeling more confident to go to the gym, to lift weights, to run, to do stuff that they haven't done before. Exactly. So that's, I need to make that clear. That's the part that I'm enjoying more with the same people who have been struggling for years, and
there's also neuroinflammation when people are obese, and it's harder to make changes. And that's why I'm a big proponent of this, because I mean, my sister went on one. She had a heart attack at 32 from being obese. And this has saved her life. It's not like she doesn't have access to the best like nutrition team, me and my husband, like she has access, but she just couldn't make that change for whatever reason. It's not my place to judge why. But it has made a huge impact in her life, and I know it's saved her life. And so that I can never be against it for that reason.
Yeah, and I mean, both you and Alex, your husband, to people who are listening this or watching this, you are both very much anti-victim mentality, but I never seen you or read anything from you or seen any piece of content where you are specifically saying that morbid obesity or obesity is due to laziness, and
no, it's not.
And I almost never see that, honestly, with clients. I almost never see it as like a byproduct of laziness.
No, once the weight's there, it's like it could just all pile on in a year or two, and then you're just like maintaining and it's just bad habits, really. My approach is skewing the victim narrative is by like, my goal is to empower you to help yourself. I don't want to handhold like people's hands for 2, 3, 4 years. I don't want them paying me that long. I want to help you. I want to show you what to do. I want you to feel empowered to make all these decisions yourself.
Yeah. I love that. That's literally echoing what I said. And I haven't, heard that from a lot of people, because client retention is a huge deal. You have a lot of coaches who predicate their entire coaching motivation and their entire business on just client retention. So you have a lot of coaches giving their clients even information by drip, drop by
Mhm.
drop. And it just doesn't, for me, it doesn't make sense. I literally had this conversation a few months ago with a very dear client of mine. And I told her, look, we've been going at this for almost a year now. I love you to death. You know that I enjoy speaking with you every week. I love our check-in calls. They are very on point and we cover everything that we need to cover. You take action on it. But you haven't took any specific action for months now. And that's because I haven't given you any tasks because you know what to do. So you don't need coaching anymore,
Yeah.
right? So like I like you, and this is what I say to a lot of my clients on the consultation call, literally like verbatim what you just said. Look, I think we're gonna be a good team. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to work with you for 2 years, right? So I hear you 100%, and I'm glad we're on the same page regarding that.
I think of myself as a teacher rather than
Uh-huh.
even more so than like a coach. That word means a lot to me, the teacher.
Yeah.
I want to
Mhm.
teach you everything I can in like a semester and let you
Uh-huh.
go off. And I want you to do better than me. Like that's how I want to approach it. I don't want to coach you
Yeah.
as always the hierarchy, like the higher person. I don't want that.
And you said it best. A lot of coaches and also a lot of clients, they predicate their entire experience on hand holding. And I think that's wrong. It's I'm not a father, I'm not a parent. You are. So with your son, you probably don't hover around him and just observing every single thing that he's gonna do. Obviously, there has to be some education, but you allow him to apply that education and learn further on his own, right? Am I right with that, or am I just?
Yes, I'm a big fan of like Montessori learning, which is very self-directed.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I approach my clients too. Like, I will give you all this information. I will tell you what's best, but I want you to apply it to your life because I don't live your life either.
Mm.
Your unique circumstances, like, you need to take my information and transpose it onto your life.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So there's this thing with GLP-1s. They're not just being used for like weight loss purposes and to like
Yep.
subdue hunger signaling and whatnot. Like they're used as an intervention for other addictions. Am I right? Am I correct?
Yes, and that's because they lower the dopamine tone. We're seeing they have similar like side effect profiles. I would say not the same, and so I don't want to give people the wrong impression, but SSRIs, say
Yeah.
like with sexual function, people are seeing the same side effects with that. And I think it's the reward seeking, like it's dampening that down a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what we're seeing with the GLPs. But the doses are way lower. Like you could take a normal weight person and put them on a low dose GLP and they'll have positive impacts with addiction. I don't like using substances to cure substance addictions or behavioral addictions because then it's too many crutches, right? But I think they can be used after a period of time of changing beliefs. And so it's like a two-step process. I think you should work with someone for around 90 days, 3 months. It doesn't have to be exact on the behavioral side of things. And then you can add these things in.
Are GLP-1s used in psychotherapy, or do you think they will ever be used?
Do I think they will be used? Yes. They are being used off-label right now for addiction. We do have some preliminary studies. I saw like a preprint on heroin use and GLPs, and so that I'm really excited for all this to come out. It will. The next 10 years, we are going to see so much data on these GLPs because they are helping autoimmune conditions. They are helping addictions. They have a vast array of uses.
On one hand, I do understand what you're trying to say, using a substance to treat another like addiction of certain substances.
Yeah,
But
it just delays the healing process, and that's why I like doing it. I like adding those after and not initially.
If you look at GLP-1s and how they affect certain addictions, my takeaway from what you're saying is that what they actually treat is the dopamine signaling, right?
Yep. They lower the dopamine tone. And so in the hypothalamus and the reward center of the brain.
But is there potential threat or potential like danger when people come off, that they will just transfer that addiction to addiction?
Yes, there always is, especially if they don't treat the beliefs, and that's why I think you have to treat the beliefs first, or it's borderline malpractice.
Yeah.
Because you're just giving someone a drug to diminish. It's kind of like antabuse for alcohol. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but that makes you like throw up every time you drink. I'm sure you've seen it on movies or something. That one, like the same thing. People will just stop taking it and then they go and drink anyway. Well, with GLPs, it's the same thing. People stop taking the shot and go do what they want to anyway. That's why you have to address the beliefs first, because then they won't adhere to the medication anyway.
Is that kind of like certain drug addictions, like heroin addictions, and then the temporary use of benzos and methadone in a similar way, like with everything we're talking about?
Yes, methadone is the same thing. It's like a temporary crutch, and I think it keeps people in the learned helplessness victim state for way too long. I think we have so much data on this that it's really negligent to be doing that. I don't support that at all with what I know.
I agree with that. But with GLP-1s, I think some like sort of addiction could potentially happen if we don't develop any habits and there's a psychological dependency on these. Like we don't have to necessarily label it as addiction. But then again, GLP-1s for a lot of people will give them that time and space to learn those behaviors, right?
Yes,
so I just think reframing how we use this tool. I mentioned this before, but reframing how we use this tool before we even use it, I think that's going to be the key to establish that healthy mindset. So I'm using this temporarily, but I need to figure out a way how to use it correctly rather than just constantly using it.
It has to be a multi-prong approach. Like you can't just throw these drugs at people. And I think a lot of GPs are doing that. I think a lot of people are just giving these people the drugs. And like I said, it's because they don't have time to talk with them and educate them, right? And so not being fat or obese is like the best thing you're going to do for your health. And so they're just like, do that. They're like, you'll be healthier. You won't be mentally healthier, but you'll be healthier physically, right? I get why they're doing it.
Well, they're doing it from the same reason as they did for decades and decades, right? Just telling people, hey, you need to lose weight, so here's this crazy fucking diet that I found on the internet, right? So maybe this is somewhat, maybe this is somewhat better. One of my biggest concerns here is that, and this literally comes, I'm not going to name this client of mine, but we kind of parted ways because he was very angry with me for me even bringing this up. I was trying to be as gentle as I was, but the entire theory is that all of us coaches, we're kind of going to lose our jobs, because why would he continue paying me when he can just continue using GLP-1s, right? Specifically Ozempic.
Yep.
And then and then I said the same thing that I told you right now, which is it gives you an opportunity, time and space to build habits and create new behavioral patterns so that you permanently solve this issue without dependency on the drug. And then he told me something that kind of just even kind of makes sense, which is he said, well, if I use Ozempic and I lose 60 pounds this year, and then next year, within 3 months, I gain 30 pounds back, I'm just going to use Ozempic again and then lose another 60. And I'm like, it's it kind of makes sense. And it comes from, but I do believe that some people
can't help everyone.
Yeah.
That kind of mindset is very defeatist, and it's not just going to show up there in his weight. It will show up in every single aspect of his life. See, I don't like labeling myself as just fitness and eating psychology, at all, because I work on the whole life. I want to change your entire life, how you walk into your work office. I want to change how you feel when you're going into the grocery store, to your kids' school. I don't want to just focus on these niche things for you. And so, he's right. He can probably address just the pounds with the shot, but it's not going to make his life better, his overall life better.
Yeah, I agree. But, when someone is convinced that they're kind of just always been destined to, quote unquote, be fat, and that's their entire identity. And it's an identity that kept them down for so long and kept them off certain opportunities, or just like seizing the life. And then they have this drug that they actually see as the panacea to all their problems. Like, it's pretty hard to convince people not to do that. And my job as a coach is not to convince people of anything, right? And
No, I
you know,
don't work with anyone that's not in the contemplation phase.
okay,
That's what my
yeah,
intake is deciding if you're in the contemplation phase, because if you're not, it's a waste of your money. You're not going to change. You're not going to change anything in your life because you're not ready yet.
I haven't framed it that way, but that's essentially what I practice as well. You know,
Yep.
I am not desperate to work with anyone to get, you know, $300 a month for a client.
Yep.
I'm not that desperate at all. So a lot of times I'm going to give people for free my advice during a consultation call and not actually sign them up as a client. I'll tell them respectfully, like, I don't think we're going to be a good fit, but I think if you come to, like you said, contemplation phase, I think then we could actually do some real work and some digging, right? But yeah, preparedness to change
Usually they get
is an
there.
actual thing. Yeah, exactly.
So
I'm just not, I don't feel I'm equipped, and I don't think that's my lane to get people to that stage.
no one is. I've taken courses in like motivational interviewing, and it's just if they're not there, I mean, you could try to manipulate them into being there, but they have to come to that realization through self-reflection, and you
Yeah,
can't go into their mind. And so it's actually very ethical to not work with people that aren't in that phase, because you know that you're not going to be taking their money essentially for
yeah.
nothing. That's just how the behavioral change process occurs. You have to reach the contemplation phase first, and then you can make shifts.
But like for me, that happened only when I hit rock bottom. Like, is
Yeah.
that a standard for most people that they
I
have
think
to get to
rock
the
bottom is very subjective.
Okay,
Other people will hit rock bottom when they realize they're, say, eating 3 pieces of cake like after dinner. That'll be their rock bottom, right? Some like
yeah,
Pilates
exactly.
instructor, that'll be her rock bottom. So it's really subjective, and I think that that's when you hit your point of the lifestyle that you were living was no longer giving you the benefits that you thought it was giving you. And you had that realization at that point. And that realization point is different for everyone. I mean, we can try to intervene, but it usually backfires. And the data shows that interventions actually don't work like people usually use right after them. And that's
Yeah,
because they're not in the contemplation phase. So people have to hit that rock bottom, even if it's subjective. Some people do die, like with obesity, that you can have a heart attack or a stroke, like, or with drug
yeah,
addiction, you can make risky decisions and die. Like that happens. And telling people that they're powerless actually increases the risk of that happening. And so that's why I am very vehemently against like all this rhetoric online where you're telling people I understand and like coddling them. It's not that I don't have compassion for these people, it's that you are going to cause them to stay stagnant and hurt themselves, and I take
yeah,
that very seriously.
yeah. I know this is going to sound very dramatic, but I swear to God, this is truth. I literally had a near-death experience, and that got me to a contemplation phase, right? So on one hand, we're talking about hitting rock bottom. On the other hand, you just mentioned some people do die of morbid obesity, right? And
Yeah.
I literally got to that place. I just had this like almost like a panic attack, and I was able to breathe in, but I wasn't able to like breathe out. So like I was just stuffing myself with air. Like my lips were like blue, face was completely white, and the ER came to my place. I was on the second floor of the house, and I was too big, too heavy for them to carry me downstairs to the ambulance vehicle. And if they waited for the assistance, it would just take too long.
Yeah.
So at that point, I look at them, and you see people from ER just they're just blasting me with like morphine and drugs or whatever, like just for me to kind of just calm down and start breathing normally. And at that point, I just kind of realized like, hey, I got what I was striving for all these years. It's kind of like what my favorite singer of all time, Lane Staley, says it's slow suicide through addiction, right?
It
And
is.
slow suicide is never the answer. And it kind of got me to that place of realization in that moment that that's kind of what I was trying to do. And I was like perfectly content with that moment where I realized like, farewell, this is what I wanted to do. I did not expect this is going to be this humiliating. And then I started breathing normally. At that point, literally 24 hours later, I was in the gym. I'm just going to change my life completely. And I know this sounds corny as shit, but I truly do believe that at that point, I was reborn into someone else. So literally from that point on, imagine me never going to the gym, never going on walks or anything like that. And from that point on, for like literally almost 4 years, I haven't skipped a single planned workout. So something clicked, something happened. And for me, like you said, subjectively, we all have our own perceptions of what rock bottom is. I think mine is pretty believable from an objective perspective as well.
Yeah, so I can give a little story too that made me think of my relation to that, where I was really depressed in an abusive relationship. And he strangled me, held guns to my head, all that. And I felt like I deserved it on the inside. And I did not leave until I felt like I deserved to be treated better. And that took 10 years, or I was there for 13, but it took that long. And that shift, I was a completely different person once I made it. And he had abused me a lot, but the last instance where my rock bottom or whatever subjective was, which a lot of people would have hit that way before that, was a concussion. It was taking my ability to read away. That was it for me. Like that was the point where I was like, I have to start loving myself, not letting people treat me that way. That's what I mean by subjective. Like a lot of people would have hit their rock bottom when they were strangled, right? Into unconsciousness. But it took me a lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of like laughing at that because you're already thinking about how other people, maybe even most people, would react in those situations. But like, for me, even though there wasn't another person abusing me per se, I was kind of doing that to myself.
It's still the same mindset.
Right? And it's the same mindset. Like you're kind of not giving up, hoping that something will change, when in all actuality you're just practicing the definition of insanity, you know. And yeah, like I hear.
And you don't love yourself enough to make the change, and that is where that's what I work with. The first session with my clients is like self-love. I know that sounds cheesy and cliche, but that is when I shifted out of that. And I've had so many like addictions, or I don't like that word, but detrimental habits that have taken a lot from my life. And it was always because I did not think I was worthy of a better life. That right there, that simple thing.
Were you aware of that in the moment? Like that you're not worthy? Or was it just in retrospect?
Looking back in retrospect, I had a lot of negative self-talk. And I can only see that from the other side. In the moment, I would say no, it was just a behavioral loop. And that's why the GLPs, I mean, they can go in there and they can help with the behavioral loop if you're working with someone, like to address the beliefs first. They can break that behavioral pattern. And so you can I just think that using them without the behavioral aspect and the mindset aspect is such a disservice to everyone.
Yeah. It's a shame not to use that opportunity to kind of get like a empty canvas of anything that you want to do, anything that you always wanted to do. And I think, look, I'm not trying to put myself here as you know, pat myself on the back and say that I should be a role model for people, you know, ever. But to be honest with you, even though I reached that point of morbid obesity, in some weird fucking way, I'm grateful for that entire experience, because just going through that, and it's been over a decade that I'm maintaining results and progressing with my physical health, with my mental health, with my demeanor, with my emotional stability, with my reactionism, with the fact that I was for a lifetime so fucking anti-psychotherapy, talking about my feelings, talking about even contemplating changing how I think about things and how I react, and to come to a place where I'm like in my 40s and I'm actively working on myself still and on my mental health. All of that stemmed from that place, right?
Exactly.
And it's difficult for me. Well, I'm now looking at in a retrospect as well, like we were talking about you and, not feeling worthy to live. So I can now say that there are certain aspects of my life that I can be proud of myself. But looking at in retrospect, I think that was one of my biggest crutches, that I wasn't able to do that, and if I didn't have this experience, like I would probably never come to this realization, at
Same.
all.
Like I don't look at my history. Like everyone here's like I have a lot of things that have happened to me, as you know. Like I've had cancer, I have repeated pregnancy loss, I've had an abusive marriage, I've had a lot of really bad things, and I don't look at any of those as like not supposed to happen to me. It's all part of the path that has made me who I am today, and appreciate my life. I'm in awe of my life right now. Like, and I would not be if I did not have those experiences. I would take it for granted, or I wouldn't be who I am.
Yeah, I agree. And I truly hope that people who are watching this or listening to this will understand the points that we are trying to make here, is that for some people for whom GLP-1s are a necessity, this is that serious and this is that quote unquote dramatic, right?
Yes.
Because being a person who struggles so much with body weight to a fact that it diminishes the life quality to an extent where they can't fully enjoy, or maybe are unable to be a parent, or they can't fully enjoy parenting. They can't fully enjoy social life. They can't travel. They can't sit in a restaurant seats. They can't sit in an airplane, like stuff like that. Like this is where you have an opportunity. Yes, it is a drug, but you do have an opportunity to dramatically affect everything that other people might perceive as unnecessary drama. It's that level of diminished life quality. And this is exactly what we're talking about, our life experience and traumas and abusive relationships. And for you, like battling cancer, for me, battling my own substance addictions and pretty much every single addiction I collected addictions like people collect Pokemon cards, so yeah, like we all have our we all have our stories when it comes
to pain,
to pain. Exactly. And I don't want people to think that we are dramatizing about this at all, because I think we need to draw a straight fucking line between people who need GLP-1s literally to survive and to rediscover themselves, because they now, like I said, have that empty canvas without that constant food noise and addiction to food, and just constantly identify as someone who just eats and sits in front of a TV, and fucking, celebrities who are just using it for vanity's sake. I mean, there shouldn't be any judgment for use of drugs, but I'm not a saint, but I do fucking judge people who are using it for vanity, and especially people who are using it for vanity if they're not honest about the use of it. So all of a sudden, like,
is what bothers me.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me. I think
it's like fake natties, right? In fitness industry.
Yeah, I think that, well, it's an integrity thing. It's kind of like working with someone that's not in the contemplation phase. It's a personal integrity thing, right? Honesty is.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we are in an industry that's built on dishonesty.
Yeah.